So I wonder how everyone is doing, considering we have had such an odd new moon and we have been in this period of transformation with Venus retrograde and Mercury retrograde. Now both planets are direct, but we also are just coming through. And of course, my last video was on the Virgo new moon, so you can take a look at that for reference. But we've also come through a new moon that is crowned or governed by a stationary Mercury. Still technically retrograde, but really for all intents and purposes stationary, because the day after the new moon, Mercury started to go direct. So, sort of to quote the famous song, not going left, not going right. And it kind of, Mercury's the ruler of the new moon and also the dispositor of the new moon chart. So we've got a 28-day cycle leading up to the Libra eclipse on October the 14th that is marked by not going left, not going right, but at the same time, two personal planets that were retrograde, Venus and Mercury, are now direct. And as I said in that new moon video, and tomorrow's the quarter moon, so 7 days after the new moon, and then we head towards the full moon on the 29th of September in about a week's time. And then, of course, we're moving towards the October 14th eclipse. So I imagine that more is going to show up to decide on, to act on, to break this kind of not going, not right or left feeling as the weeks progress. And certainly as we head towards the full moon on the 29th, it's an active, things start to become more active. But as I've also mentioned, things really don't get going until that October 14th eclipse. And I wonder if this is how we're all feeling. The other thing that I will mention is that Jupiter, of course, is also now retrograde. So while Venus and Mercury are direct, Jupiter is retrograde. And for those of us, the vast majority of us who have Jupiter direct in our birth charts, I should say the majority of us, not the vast majority of us, the majority of us who have Jupiter direct in our birth charts, this makes whatever Jupiter has been trying to create in terms of a new beginning or an auspicious new beginning and an ending, wherever the sign of Taurus is in your chart, Jupiter's made the first push, but now it goes into reverse, only to make the second and final push in the new year, in 2024. Jupiter goes direct around December the 31st of this year. So, and when Jupiter's retrograde, for those of us who have Jupiter direct in our birth charts, we have to work extra hard to access that feeling of Jupiterian luck, that feeling of somehow Providence looking over everything and kind of greasing the wheels and keeping things going, so that we can feel lucky, fortunate, like things will probably end up right, etc. When Jupiter's retrograde, for those of us who have Jupiter direct in our birth charts, it feels like you really have to work extra hard because you don't have that kind of support. So you've really got to create your luck, or more importantly, you've got to not rely on a certain type of luck to make sure that things happen. So there's a certain anxiety that this creates. Now, if you have Jupiter retrograde in your birth chart, then when Jupiter is retrograde, is a time for things to come to culmination and manifestation. And, for you, it's a very different experience. Jupiter retrograde can be a very different experience. All those things that did not quite work out while Jupiter was direct now have a chance to work out. This video, I really want to address for the final time both Venus and Mercury going direct, because both of the next two full moons, including the second full moon that is going to be coming up. The first full moon is the Aries full moon on the 29th of September, and the full moon after that is the full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus on October the 28th. Both those full moons are in direct conversation with the recent retrogrades, Venus and Mercury. At the time of the Aries full moon, it's much more direct, because both Venus and Mercury are clearing their shadow periods, the shadow degrees, the degrees they've gone over at least twice and are now going over the third time now that they're direct. And all the critical or the major or the important transits they made during their retrograde cycles they are getting ready to make for the third and final time. Specifically, Venus in Leo, now direct, over the next week or so is going to trine Chiron tomorrow. It's already trine Jupiter for the third and final time a few days ago. Trine Chiron tomorrow. Square Uranus on the 29th, on the day of the full moon. Trine the North Node on October the 3rd. And kind of clear its shadow period on October the 7th. And the only other thing I'm going to say about Venus direct is that the one aspect Venus was about to make when, it's an important aspect, about to make before it went retrograde and was not able to make, was of course a conjunction with Mars, kind of the consummation or the creation of something. And that conjunction with Mars happens in the opposite sign of Aquarius, fascinatingly, on February 22nd, 2024. So that's one date out in the future to look out for with regard to what this Venus retrograde and going direct has been about. So specifically, one more time, let me give you these dates. Venus, now direct, still continues to go over the degrees that it was retrograde in. Venus entered its shadow period or shadow degrees at 12 degrees Leo on June the 19th. So from June the 19th to October the 7th, Venus goes over the same part of the chart, direct, retrograde, direct, 3 times. October the 7th, it clears the retrograde degrees, and on October the 9th, she enters Virgo. From Virgo to make sort of the Virgo transits that all the recent planets, Sun, Mars, Mercury, have made, opposing Saturn, trining Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus, and opposing Neptune. But we are more interested in this video on Venus finishing up its Leonine transits that it has been making since June the 19th. I'm going to let each of you ponder. So June the 19th, Venus entered the shadow degrees. July the 22nd, forgive me, she went retrograde. September the 3rd, she went direct. And October the 7th, the shadow period ends. The transits, once again, that she's due to make, trining Chiron, Venus in Leo, trining Chiron in Aries for the third and final time tomorrow, September the 23rd. Squaring Uranus on September the 29th, the day of the Aries full moon. October the 3rd, trining the North Node. And then February 22nd of 2024, finally conjuncting Mars, something she was not able to do. So this Venus retrograde and direct, specifically, keeping in mind where we want to go, what is in our heart, what we value, what our values are, and how are we organizing our finances, our expenditure, our financial management, and our relationships. As I've said in previous videos, Venus retrograde is my favorite retrograde, because it does force you to and allow you to terminate relationships that instinctively you have known are not in your highest interest, or at least deal with them, determine who's in the boat and who's not in the boat. Since Venus went direct on September the 3rd, and this holds true till about October the 7th, you are going through those shadow period, the shadow degrees for the third and final time. So it may well be a time as you move forward, ideally, gracefully and swan-like, with your new connection with your values and what you value and what you are building your life around, what your goals are, what your financial management is supposed to support, your expenses, your income, your resources, and what your relationships should be supporting. You may well be contending with and dealing with and dotting the I's and crossing the T's on these matters till October the 7th. Now, while, again, we're dealing with this kind of dual challenge where we have Venus moving forward, making some important transit, trining Chiron, squaring Uranus, already trined Jupiter a few days ago, trining the North Node. These are opportunity-laden And since September the 3rd, we may have started to feel more attractive, especially creatively, romantically, perhaps, but attractive. Venus is an attractive, more passive energy. She's not Mars. She's not a desire and I'm going to go after this stuff. But opportunity, it's a much more internally, it's not as if things aren't showing up in the real world that things come to you, they show up, you show up for them. It's a very sort of, the universe extends a hand and Venus extends a hand and you show up from them. It's a very different energy of kind of manifestation and creation than Mars's energy, which is much more, what are my goals? And I'm going to go after them and I'm going to make them happen. I'm going to pursue them. And what is my action plan? With Venus, action is there, but there's also this kind of play with opportunity and luck, and it's a much more internal, much more intuitive, much more archetypally feminine energy. And with Venus direct since September the 3rd, the sense of opportunity may well be present, but we just have to contend with the fact. And as I said, I expect that starting next week and then going into each consecutive week, moving towards that October 14th eclipse, moving towards that October 28th eclipse, we will start to feel a lot more forward momentum. Right now, the confusion is that the attractiveness is there and may well, again, this has been the puzzling thing about, this entire retrograde cycle where it's been active in terms of certain types of manifestations and the lunations, the Leo new moon that happened before the Virgo new moon, as I mentioned, trined the North Node. The Virgo new moon, while crowned by a stationary Mercury, still trined Uranus in Taurus. A new set of activities over the next 28 days, now 21 odd days, supporting greater authenticity and the right kind of creation in the Taurus part of your chart. The fly in the ointment with the Virgo new moon recently is the opposition to Neptune. So you have to keep an eye out for deception and leaks and loss as well. So you've got to, again, the Virgo new moon video I did will give you more information on this, but that sense of, but things are happening and things are coming, but it has this kind of sense of, for lack of a better way of putting it, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of energy. And now, of course, over the past week, but even to some extent till October 14th, this kind of sense of, am I doing the right thing? But then we've got Venus and Mercury now moving forward going, well, here's a carrot in front for you to kind of follow, and here's something else, and here's another sign, and here's a direction, and keep moving here, and keep sorting this out, and keep sorting that out. Isolating all these energies and just coming back to the Venus going direct. Important to stay in touch with that compass that has been spinning and retrograding since June of this year, but especially July the 23rd, to pay attention to and remember with Venus retrograde, any opportunities and any romantic situations that come up while Venus is retrograde may feel different once Venus is direct, may not pan out, may not have long-term sustaining a strong foundation. When Venus retrograde occurs, things can happen in a very kind of, again, very romantic, and feel very sparky and very convincing. But then as Venus goes direct, it's like, an appearance changes while Venus is retrograde. You might feel differently about once Venus is direct. All of that classic things can play out. But especially as we go into next week, and especially as we go into the full moon, these are the transits that Venus has been waiting to make for a third and final time. Jupiter a few days ago, Chiron trine, square Uranus, trine the North Node, particularly as we head towards that trine to the North Node. So pay attention again to opportunities and where you want to go and how you need to manage your finances. Do not lose your focus and concentration on what Venus has been trying to teach you and the alignment that she has been trying to seek with regard to your finances and your relationships. As you head towards October the 7th, you may find that you are exercising and actively working towards putting things in place to lead you to that direction. And if there has been a certain amount of rethinking, overthinking, confusion, shall I, shan't I, what does this mean, what does it not, over the past week or so, and it may continue in some form, dissipating as we head over the next 3 weeks or so, just pay attention to this interplay between Venus as she moves ahead over the next week or so, and how the universe is to give you a sense of which direction it is that you need to move in. But keep an eye on your purse, keep an eye on everything that you've been learning since June, but especially July the 23rd, and be open to the fact that if things showed up, let's say July 20th onwards, and after the September the 3rd, between July 20th onwards till September the 3rd, opportunities, relationship opportunities, romantic, that you may feel differently about them now. But what is the link between where you're really going? Because other things have clearly shown up, particularly with that Leo new moon about 5 weeks ago, that are moving you forward in a particular direction. Even if you're not completely moving forward till October the 14th, where are you headed? Where do you see your luck? Where's your heart? What do you value? And how's that linked to what your values are with regard to relationships and support and finances, and how you're gonna don't lose those lessons, and you'll realize that you need to deploy them. And it may come up as we head towards, with Venus, the trine to Chiron is tomorrow, but the most interesting transit for me is Venus squaring Uranus on the 29th, and the day of the full moon, and then trining the North Node on October the 3rd. So don't despair, because things are going to start revving back up. Part of the confusion that we're feeling, even though Venus is now direct, is also the fact that Mercury went direct, and Mercury went direct on the 15th, which is not a long time ago. It's about a week ago. And Mercury is slowly starting to move forward. Well, this is nice. With Mercury, we do expect the following transits to come up as well over the next week or so. On the 25th, Mercury will trine Jupiter for the third and final time. This is the primary transit that Mercury has made 3 times while it's been retrograde. And to remind you, Mercury's shadow period began on August the 3rd. I say that wickedly, I'll tell you why. Retrograde August 23rd, direct September the 15th, and Mercury, so interesting. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of paying attention to something here. Give me 1 sec. And Mercury's shadow period ends on September the 30th. So shadow period began August the 3rd, retrograde August the 23rd, direct September 15th, September 30th. This shadow period ends. September the 30th, also Mercury trines Uranus, which is something Mercury was not able to do because it went retrograde in Taurus. And on October the 2nd, Mercury opposes Neptune. So whatever this new moon opposition to Neptune, this kind of building something in the Virgo part of your chart so it can support authenticity in the Taurus part of your chart, but keeping an eye onto this kind of ongoing theme of deception and loss and gaslighting in the Pisces part of our chart that has been plaguing us since 2014 to 16. But, you know, it could be a more recent kind of leak or deception or loss. It could be something more permanent. Keeping an eye onto that. It wouldn't surprise me as you head towards October 22nd if words or plans as this week progresses aren't put into place to address that somehow, or there's something that comes to your notice, or communication, transaction becomes a valuable tool to manage any leaks so that you can continue to capitalize and build on whatever you need to build on in the Virgo part of your chart to support the Taurus part of your chart. So focusing again on Mercury, shadow period August the 3rd, direct, retrograde August the 23rd, direct September 15th, shadow period ends September 30th. Now, the biggest thing about Mercury retrograde, and once Mercury is direct, this becomes more obvious. The most disappointing thing about Mercury retrograde is not so much, I find, the transactional and the technical difficulties that we ascribe to it, but is the reality check that it gives us. So for some particular situation that may have these dates of August 3rd, August 23rd, September 15th as important milestones, with Mercury retrograde in this particular cycle, something that occurred with those dates in mind, you may have found that by September the 15th, or as you headed towards it and as you're heading past it, and as you're heading towards September 30th, there's a reality check about a particular situation. With Mercury retrograde, what Mercury retrograde does so well and so disappointingly is that it counters or it attacks any sort of fantasy thinking about a particular situation where we think, and this is perfectly natural, perfectly human, opportunities coming, things are happening, and we're like, oh my God. And then during Mercury retrograde, and especially once it starts to get ready to go direct, it goes bam, it's like, here's something you need to know. And it's something that is in your blind spot that was not clear, and you can't ignore it. And your knowing that is going to color how you're going to move forward with a particular situation. And you have to factor it in because you can no longer ignore it. And that kind of coming back down to earth is always a disappointing process. It's always a sobering process, but it is a necessary process. And as you head towards September the 30th, this coming week, it leads to this question of, well, what are you going to do and how are you going to go about it? This coming week is, part of the purpose of this video is to say, if this last week has felt like, what on earth is going on? There was a certain amount of momentum, and now I don't know what to do, and where am I, and what have I found out, and what is going, this coming week is going to start to brush some of those cobwebs away. It's a kind of a picking yourself up, dusting yourself off. Venus is going to continue to make you attractive and bring opportunities in that you're going to have to consider. Mercury is finally going to be starting to gather some momentum, so we're not kind of dealing with this new moon with Mercury stationary and Mercury going direct on the 15th. We're now towards the 22nd, 23rd. And this next week, both Venus makes her final transits for the third time, and Mercury makes his final transits for the third and final time. And they both, as we head into the first week of October, finish up their shadow periods. And so as I said, this 29th, September 29th full moon, not only Venus squaring Uranus, but on the 30th, Mercury trining Uranus, something that he was not able to do. And on this October 2nd, Mercury opposing Neptune, something he was not able to do, and because he went retrograde. And on October the 3rd, Venus trining in the North Node. Now, Mercury also, so let me just go over the Mercury transits one more time. The 25th, Mercury trines Jupiter for the third and final time. Some sort of communication, some sort of thinking in the Virgo part of our chart, supporting a new beginning in the Taurus part of our chart. And again, you want more details on these transits, take a look at my previous few videos about the Mercury Venus retrograde and Virgo new moon and the Leo new moon. It's all, if this is the first video you're seeing, there's more, you can go into more detail in those particular videos. And then Mercury clears the shadow period by the 30th and finally is able to trine Uranus and Taurus. Again, something in Virgo, a communication supporting the greater authenticity in the Taurus part of our chart. Oppose Neptune by October 2nd. So if something is bothering you, something is a leak, something feels deceptive, Mercury is now direct. You can use whatever the reality check is from a Mercury perspective, and start to put it into action and start to move towards that October 14th new moon, after which things really do start to move forward in a more grounded manner, keeping in mind the things that you can't ignore and how are you going to deal with those. And of course, October the 3rd, as I said, Venus trines the North Node. Now, two more things about Mercury retrograde. Projects that have a Mercury retrograde connection, either started while Mercury retrograde typically, or happened while Mercury, can face or deal with greater forward momentum again and again while Mercury is retrograde. So if there was a project that, for example, if there was a project that was worked on while Mercury was retrograde, and one of the Mercury retrograde cycles may come back up again. There may be future developments or further developments while Mercury is retrograde again and again and again. You might find that certain projects gather momentum and have next steps while Mercury is retrograde because they started or they occurred while Mercury was retrograde, however many Mercury retrograde cycles before. Finally, with Mercury retrograde, if someone is dealing with some sort of a terminal illness situation and there's a prognosis that goes over time, Mercury retrograde can speed up. If there's an inevitable conclusion, Mercury retrograde can speed up that process. So I'm sorry to focus on the negative here, but if someone is given 6 months or 8 months, Mercury retrograde can create a development where it turns back, it goes retrograde, and as it goes direct, it speeds up the inevitable so that that timeline becomes much more condensed. As if Mercury says, you know what, if this is the direction it's going in, let's minimize the pain and discomfort and expedite the process if there's no help or repair in a situation. Now, I told you that both the full moons coming up, the Aries full moon in about a week's time and the Taurus full moon, had something to do with these retrogrades. With the Aries full moon, it should be clear that as we head over the next week, both Venus and Mercury are making their final transits that they made 3 times during this retrograde process. And as they clear the full moon, they are free to make certain transits that they were blocked from making, particularly Mercury. Venus has another major transit out in February of 2024 that I've already referred to. The one thing that Mercury was not able, and it's interesting, both of these transits that Venus and Mercury had that had to be postponed out were with Mars. Venus was supposed to conjunct Mars, but she went retrograde before she was able to do so. Mercury was going to conjunct Mars in Virgo, but then he was not able to do so. Mercury conjuncts Mars around the time, the day after the October 28th eclipse. So, there's something about the Mercury retrograde cycle, the week before and after July the 28th, the week before or after August the 28th, and Mercury went retrograde August the 23rd, it has a connection to the October 28th eclipse. And the Pisces full moon that occurred around that time had a connection to October 20th, so whatever Mercury was not able to do or build, it's going to build with Mars in Scorpio around October the 28th. If you know your chart and you know where these houses sit, you will be able to make the connections and you'll be able to see exactly. Look, let me just start to bring this home and summarize. Whatever forward momentum we have seen, and we have seen some with the Leo new moon 5 weeks ago, and with this Virgo new moon as well, the forward momentum is real. There's been a sense of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back with the fact that Venus and Mercury have been retrograde. There's, especially this last week, there could have been a sense of real having to go back to something, or confusion, or which way to go, or doubting things, or is this really the direction? Is this not what do I? Well, Mercury, your mind is stationary. It's just like, it's like the proverb is 2 of Swords in tarot, that card, or, it's like confusion, just static, mentally static. This energy will start to shift and lift over the next 3 weeks. And yes, it is the October 14th new moon and eclipse after which things really decisively start to move forward. But some of that energy will start to be felt now. There are things to tackle and things to manage and things to handle. And as we head towards the Aries full moon in about a week's time, opportunities may come through Venus. Conversations and communication and transactions may occur with Mercury in a way that start to dot the I's and cross the T's with this entire retrograde process. The thing to remember and to keep in mind with Venus is where it is that you think, where it is that you want to go, what you value, what you want to build towards, what your values are, and how your finances and your relationships are going to align towards that process. And you may find that you're still putting some of those things into action. Those people who you have decided to invest in, but also those people that you have decided to separate or distance yourself from, you may find over the next week that you continue to be tested or continue to be given opportunities to do so. After Venus clears her shadow degrees and starts to move into Virgo, by the end of this month, you might find that you're much more decisive and much clearer about what those interactions are going to be. Some of the interactions of the next week may still be tinged by, separating from existing can be challenging. It takes time. You have to rewire yourself. You have to put yourself in a different groove to manage what needs to be managed. Relationships or opportunities that came up while Venus was retrograde may no longer seem that attractive moving forward. But I would feel pretty strongly to say, since Venus went direct on September the 3rd, other things have been coming up that feel more attractive. So if something no longer feels attractive, it's likely or possible that there are other things that have come up since Venus is direct that are likelier to stick. And if you do decide to pursue some sort of opportunity that's linked to Venus retrograde, just continue to do your due diligence as you move forward, because they may be tinged with the relationship and financial issues that Venus retrograde has been trying to sort out. So just bring your new, graceful, Venusian-y, recharged self to that particular situation and get a sense of which way you're going to go with it. With Mercury direct, you are going to need to actively factor in and deal with, through communication and transactions, what you now know that you did not know a month ago, even going back to the shadow period beginning on August the 3rd. The other thing with Mercury direct, and this is important, is that the new Mercury cycle in Virgo began on September the 6th. There are Mercury-related tasks you need to do in the Virgo part of the chart that are more actively required since September 15th, when Mercury went direct, to October 20th. This is a really important thing, and you are bound to be feeling it. Bound to be feeling it. Mercury's communication, transactions, contracts, it could be resumes and sales and interactions, and you need to get the word out, and you need to through writing, communication, mentally, etc. You need to engage, you need to make something happen in a mercurial way in the Virgo part of the chart. September 6th is when this process started, but September 6th to 15th, it may have been kind of a requirements definition phase. September 15th onwards, which is just a week ago, but till October 20th, you've got to start to move from 1st to 6th on this and make things happen. And the last week may feel a little bit like a write-off, where you're like feeling the mounting pressure of doing so. But now that you're entering this next week and Mercury is direct, more momentum. By all means, get yourself into that groove. It's important to do so. And with Mercury, October 29th, Mercury conjuncts Mars. And February 22nd of next year, Venus conjunct Mars. So there's some sort of a culmination for whatever it is that has been brewing since June the 19th, when Venus enters her shadow period. As you head towards October 28th and then February 22nd, you'll see what edifice, what these changes are that are trying to be built. it's time to get back on the horse. And the next 3 weeks may find you still very much dealing, the next 3 weeks may find you galloping towards a new future that has been building for a while, starting October the 14th. But in galloping towards that new future, you may find that knowing what you now know that is much more grounded and real with Mercury direct. Knowing what you now know with regard to how you need to manage your finances and relationships with Venus direct. You may find that over the next 3 weeks, you are dealing with whatever you need to deal with that are past issues to allow yourself to really kind of go through that portal or doorway after October the 14th. And October the 14th is an eclipse of release. So wherever you may have felt you've been over the last week, just know that while the next 3 weeks still have a little bit of that churn, back, forth, forward, backwards, forward, dealing with the past, etc., increasingly the pull will be more forward, and you're going to start to feel that this coming week with Venus trining Chiron, but more importantly, squaring Jupiter and trining the North Node in the next 10 days, and Mercury trining Jupiter and then trining Uranus and opposing Neptune. With this Mercury retrograde, if there's something that you have learned or seen that points to a certain kind of deceptive energy, as you head towards October 2nd, there's a real opportunity to stop the leak. Look at other alternatives. You know, this kind of sobering aspect of Mercury retrograde and what it has told you may be very necessary with Mercury retrograde and what you learn, factoring it into the plan. How many eggs can you put in a particular basket? Do you need to start putting eggs in different baskets? You can still go towards whatever it is that you want in a Venusian sense, what you value, what is important to you, what you want to build. You may just have to look for alternatives. Or you know, with Mercury direct now, but whatever it has taught you, whatever information it has given you while you is retrograde, whatever reality check has been given to you, may need you to go, well, do I still think about option A, which is what I was thinking of while Mercury was retrograde, or do I look at option B or C or D? And as you head towards October the 2nd, what is it that you need to address with regard to some sort of a leak or thievery or deceptiveness or gaslighting or something along those lines? Final part of this summary, as you head towards October the 29th, the day after the October 20th eclipse, Mercury conjuncts Mars. Some part of what Mercury and Mars were trying to build somehow becomes complete in the Scorpio part of your chart. Fascinating. And as you head towards February the 22nd of next year, there's the possibility that everything that this Venus retrograde has been trying to help you move towards is somehow in place, or well on its way of being in place by February the 22nd of next year. Okay, I hope you found this useful. Feel free to share, tell your friends about it, blah, blah, blah. You know, if you found the video, feel free to bring people to it that you feel would benefit from it. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and if you subscribe, click on the bell icon, and when you click on the bell icon upstairs, right on top of it, upstairs of it, there's a wiggly bell. If you click on that, you'll be notified when I do new videos, inquiries, for readings or any other questions. The email address is in this sort of description area. You can use that, and feel free to like or comment. It gives the video more circulation. Thank you very much. Until the next video.